Welcome back to Enter the Matrix. And the Matrix has been trying to keep us down, Nikolai. This has been a process to try and get the next episode done.
I'd say it was a journey to get the previous one even edited and uploaded. It took me a couple of weeks, given all stuff that happened during the recording. And now, yes, to get to this one, I don't know, what is it, like 2-3 weeks?
Yeah.
Always internet problems on your end, me traveling and trying to get Starlink working in location where I am, which still doesn't work. Hence, I'm in a co-working space with a very echoey room.
Yeah,
Which
and I've
nobody
got
will hear post editing, hopefully.
I've got the TP link outside my door to hopefully keep the signal alive. So here we are.
We have won. We are here.
Yes. And so a lot's happened since we had our last episode. I went down a rabbit hole that you sent me down reading Michael Singer's Surrender Experiment, which was a fantastic book. Thank you for the journey. And that's sort of where I wanted to go into a little bit today. So because I got a lot of questions around this, and I think how people in general, all the people that listen to this podcast, can try to apply the concept of surrender into their lives. So first, I wanted to talk about you and where have you learned to use this concept of surrender in your own life, and how do you view the process of surrendering?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll start with one, I guess, clause. It's a journey. A disclaimer. That's the word I was looking for. I will start with a disclaimer. It has been a journey. The first time I read the book, I think it was around 4 or 5 years ago, and I did not understand how to surrender at all. It did not make any sense to me when I read it first time. And interesting thing is, I have a friend who I recommended it to read again, and he started rereading it yesterday, and it's landing completely differently. And we're working with him on his karma, and one of his karmas is to learn to surrender. But at the end of the day, it's a broader approach to life, which we also call there are a few things. There's 3 methods that we talk a lot about: is way of warrior, way of water, and the master of life. And in all of them, surrendering is a critical skill, but there are different flavors of surrender. So way of warrior is when a person accepts any kind of events that Matrix presents to them and gets engaged in those events to understand what the lesson is there, what's the evolutionary growth there. Because a lot of people, any kind of uncomfortable events, they try to run from them. But what Matrix does, it just keeps repeating them, and every cycle they get stronger and louder, and ultimately you end up in a place where you cannot run away. And then you'll just have, the only way is through. So one important type of surrender is to surrender to what is Matrix presenting, the events that Matrix is presenting, and go into them. Because if you do not learn that lesson, then there will be another lesson and another lesson and another one of the same kind, and it just gets louder and more intense. So, for example, let's say somebody is somebody is learning how to interact with energies of children, and which I was learning. If you take it to the extreme point, let's say you could first avoid the kids of all your friends, and you just don't go anywhere close to, playgrounds for children, any kind of interactions you avoid. Then let's say you avoid, to have a baby with your partner if you're in a relationship, and you're avoiding and avoiding, but the matrix keeps presenting, let's say, a sibling brings their kid and says, you have to babysit them because, I have something critical, and you find a way out of that even. And then the ultimate stage could be where your partner just gets pregnant unplanned. And then, of course, there is an escape there as well. But even if you escape that with all the, today's medicine and etc., then you could, let's say, fall in love with another partner who already have kids. And the love is so strong, and a relationship was so good that there's no way around it. So every step forward, it basically gets harder and harder to get out of that learning or that experience. So might as well, while, when your sibling brings a child for babysitting, might as well go into that, or you end up in some kind of a backyard barbecue and there are kids and they're like really frustrating you. And that's, of course, very specific type of lesson. Then you just go over it and with openness and curiosity and learn how to interact with that energy, because children carry specific type of energy. And so rather than being triggered, and one of the indication is, of course, if you're triggered, that's of course, in the first place, the reason a person's trying to run away from that event that matrix is presenting. So whenever you're triggered, that is an indication you should be actually stepping forward. First, you calm yourself down, then you're stepping in, and that is one type of surrender. The second type of surrender, if we go to the way of water, the way of water is just adaptability. Meaning when the water flows, it finds every possible crack and it finds the most effective way to get from one place to the other place based on gravity. And it's very effective and efficient in that. Whereas humans, humans' mind, ego, believes they know the best methods. And as a result, when they face some kind of situation, they think they know what will be the most effective and efficient way to deal with that situation. So the second way, or the second type of surrender, is to surrender to a state that you actually don't know what the best method is. And if you just sit back or step back and observe and remove any kind of templates, mental constructs, stereotypical type of thinking, and almost pronounce out to the world, to the universe, show me what the way is. Yes, I have a way that I think I can approach with, but show me the way. And usually a more effective and efficient way will present. But this type of surrender is difficult because mind ego is very strong, because it wants to know and control everything. So it goes, I know exactly, how to get a, let's say, residency in this country. And you start hammering through that, and then start facing a bunch of roadblocks just to arrive at the method that could have been the smoothest, the easiest method if somebody just stepped back, maybe chatted to a few people, and was just open to different suggestions. Versus the mind, you could have went, let's say, to 5 websites of different companies, and one looked super professional, and because there is, for a lot of people, a template in their mind that the most professional website will probably correlate with the better service and etc. And now they're set on this. No, this is the only company I will work with. Whereas there's a random guy who does it as an individual, helping others, let's say, to get residency in the car or work with some kind of documents, is substantially more effective because he knows everybody in the government body, he knows the latest rules, he's up to speed, and etc. But because it doesn't fit in the template, that's an opposite of surrender. This my way or the highway. So that's another type of surrender. And the third one, what we call is master of life. Master of life is basically merging all of that, is the ultimate surrender, where the person realizes that the fifth matrix that we're still partially in is all about teaching us all types of evolutionary experiences. And by evolutionary experiences, I mean it's helping us to develop new qualities. It helps us. Helps us to learn how to interact with energies that we haven't interacted before with. So it becomes our. So those become our superpowers. So we expand. We become more powerful. So we can create more advanced products, services, systems, whatever it is. So that we can structure more environment through our creation. So in mastery of life, we first of all surrender to that understanding that we're learning here in the fifth matrix. And whoever makes it over to the sixth matrix, we will still be learning because it's all about evolution, but we will be in the fifth matrix. We're learning about we're harmonizing our character, our personality, all the distorted parts of our personality. Whereas in the sixth matrix, we will be learning how to create in every possible way. And what else can we create? So coming back to mastery of life, we surrender to understanding, okay, we're learning here and we never stop. Either you're 30, 18 years old or 50 years old, you're still learning. Whereas there's this one of the constructs that prevents people from learning is that, well, I've done all my learning up till 22 in the university and that's it. And a majority of population have that limiting belief and they think they're not learning anymore. And hence matrix makes the lessons harder and harder, so they ultimately learn. So for anybody listening right now, if you really reflect, no matter of the age, if you reflect on the past year, you've definitely learned something. There's not a human on this planet that hasn't learned something in the past year, even if it was something small. And of course, the more you resist, the slower the pace is and the less pleasant the interactions are with the matrix or the world around us. And the world around us includes people, companies, governments, events, and etc. So mastery of life, we first accept that we're learning here. Right now, we're learning everything related to harmonizing our personality and becoming effective, basically, at managing ourselves. And then we'll be learning all types of all the waves of creation and co-creation, which is collaboration with others. And so the next part of mastery of life is way of warrior, encapsulates it, which is, since I know I'm learning, I'm open to any experiences because every experience brings learning, and I surrender to that. And once I step into that experience, way of water comes in, and you're basically, I'm flexible and adaptable. I like to go through this experience in the most effortless, easy way possible. Hence, I'm open to suggestions from people around me, from the environment, to symbols. So, for example, I was trying to figure out where to record this podcast, and so the Starlink thing wasn't happening. And I was like, oh, I really don't want to do the co-working space. But then I was like, you know what? Let's do the co-working space. And I find few co-working spaces nearby, and two of them are great. And then I'll talk about where I'm not surrendering yet. So I message one that I like the most, like beautiful settings, like the buildings here, like new, massive, tall ceilings, all like big windows. It's like basically an architecture and design firm that built it. So everything is like amazing standard.
Yeah.
And the other one is like low ceilings, orange walls. So very like techie, IT, geeky, nerdy setup. And I was like, hey, but then these guys are not responding to me. So I get impatient. So I message the other guys and they respond within seconds. And then I go, oh, I guess that's where I'm supposed to record the podcast, right? And they give me the price that I can reserve it. Everything's super fast. But then I'm still not feeling the environment. So where I'm not surrendering is where I was not surrendering, where I was still trying to get to the result the fastest way possible. And I could have got to a subpar result. And luckily, somewhere around 10 p.m., this place responds. And I was like, and they're like, and the price is great. Because I thought this place will be like super overpriced and et cetera, et cetera. The price is more or less like the other one, maybe a little bit more. and it's available, and they're super nice. And I'm like, to me, that was the example. The learning for me was just, trust your intuition. My intuition was to go here. I still ended up here, but I've expended additional energy, and I've created unnecessary interaction and potentially created unnecessary hope for the other co-working space that I'll be renting there, kind of basically meeting rooms or studio space or whatever. So whereas if I would be like, okay, I feel this is the place, I really like it, I'll message it, and I'll relax and see what happens. And this is another flavor of surrender. So if would summarize surrender, and if I would just kind of jump back to the first time I read the book, the way I misunderstood it is that, surrender means like you become this very, like you lose your internal core or spine, and you become this like mushy being who just says, it's like yes man, the what's Jim Carrey movie, right?
Yeah.
You just become that strange person that has no say, has nothing. No, surrender is not that. Surrender is basically is three things I've described, but at the same time, it's still being active and involved in life. It's not like I'm just gonna sit on my chair. I've surrendered. Life happened to me. Uh, Not the approach. We still like continue doing what we're doing in life, but when things are presented, we're not rigid, and we're open, and we're willing to go into experiences. So these are some of the flavors of the surrender. And in a book, his approach was more what I would also add. I come from the world of hyperactivity, Western entrepreneur, super hyperactive, a lot of actions. Only small percent of actions lead to results. My business partner, Maxime, and my teacher, Maxime, comes from a place of what we call uh, conservational laziness. So he will do nothing for the longest period of time until matrix or universe indicated to him this is the thing to do. And he has the way he basically designed his contract with the matrix is give me 3-time indication that I'm supposed to do that. Otherwise, I'm not going to even lift my finger. So he learned from me to be more active. I learned from him this conservational laziness where I literally somebody mentions something. So let's say we have the book, right? And they're like, oh, it would be nice to have an audiobook, or it would be nice to print it. And now we're gearing up to print the Russian version of the book. But the first time I was like, audiobook? Why don't you read the book or print it? Come on, digital is so easy. You don't have to carry it with yourself and etc. So like there was some resistance. But the old version of me would be like, okay, audiobook, recording today. So I would like just go too fast, and nobody might need the audiobook. It is just the only person. So I was like, okay, step back. And then it's like, okay, the next time somebody asks audiobook, okay, I'm like, okay, twice. And then guess what happens? 2 days ago, somebody watches our podcast, connects with us. We do some very important energetic work. That person connects us to another person. That person basically is a literature critic and like radio host and etc. And he's reading our book and he says, "Why don't I record? Why don't I create audio version of this book?" Audiobook out of this book, right? So and those are the examples of like I could have leaned in, started rushing and pushing it from my hyperactive versus I more use the method. Okay, I observe the environment and see when it actually needs to happen. And now I don't have to do it myself. There is a person who is more experienced and skilled, and he reads so many books and edits them, critiques them, and the list goes on. Plus, he produced so many singers, musicians, plus like radio shows, the list goes on. So it's like kind of his specialty. So that's one of the potential paths that showed up. So there are these two extremes, and ultimately surrender is finding the balance in these. And I'll pause here.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things I want to unpack there, especially looking at it like those concepts, right? Like especially like
Yeah.
way of warrior.
Yeah.
So, like, how does one kind of discern when to surrender? Like, especially when life
Yeah.
presents so many different things, because like this has been spinning in my mind forever now, or at least the last couple of months, and then reading the book, like I'm like, yeah, I mean, like, what do I surrender to now? Because something will show up, and I'm like, do I surrender to this or not, or do I surrender to this or not? Like,
Well, why don't we have maybe there are some kind of real life examples top of mind.
oh my god, like, even just one small example, like, um, you know, uh, the guy that I'm partnering with, like he wants to go looking through the stuff. So he's like, hey, do you feel comfortable? Can you send me the passwords for all the
Yeah.
different tech things, right?
Yeah.
And there's the part of me that's like, no, because now, it's like, well, if I give
Yeah.
someone the passwords, they could do whatever they want, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, but am I fighting it? And then I'm thinking about like what you were saying, where it's like, well, if they're going to screw you over, they're going to screw you over regardless. And so, but I'm pulled in so many directions of, do I do this? Do I not do this? Do I do this? Do I
Yeah.
not do this? And I've just noticed where it could even be just little things throughout the day where I'm like, something can present itself, and it could even be just opportunities, like somebody's like, hey, like let's go to this thing. And is it is Matrix wanting me to go have some experience because maybe there's some cascading downstream effect that
Mm-hmm.
it wants me to have? Or should I be like, well, no, I'm either I don't feel like going out. So I'm trying to also figure out, like, where do we, because this was one of the things that Michael Singer talked about in that book, where he was referencing not, how am I going to phrase this properly, not being beholden to his preferences.
That's way of water.
and 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 then even within that, well, it there was Way of Water, and then there was like Way of Warrior. Just an example, it's like someone just started building on his land.
Yeah.
It's like, and then he's like, okay, they can just build. Um, yeah, like, how do you avoid being taken advantage of? Because that's the other thing I was thinking about. Like, well, okay, if I'm kind of surrendering to so many things, you're open to being really taken advantage of. And how are you able to discern, like,
Yeah.
this is the time I should, and this, because I can reference times in the past. Now maybe it's just a karmic thing, but for example, like, the guy that took a whole bunch of money from me, where he's like, oh yeah, we're friends, like, I do trading, I got this, like, invest this money, and it's an opportunity being presented to me, so
Mm-hmm.
I go into it, and
Yes.
then all the money's gone. And so, again, I'm kind of dancing around here, but it's like,
I get it.
yeah, how do we know when this is the time to surrender, and how do we know that this is not the time? And that's what I
Yeah,
I struggle with.
yeah, and that's why this whole concept of surrender is so nuanced, and that's why what I mentioned at the beginning is like, I didn't get it. I thought surrendering is being this like uh, pushover, like you're just okay, let's start unpacking it. There are two things you mentioned, things that are triggering and things that are opportunities. I think those are two very different scenarios. Let's start with the triggering things. The triggering things were, for example, the passwords, right? So it's triggering you. That means you need to go into that experience. Of course, the question is, how do you go into that experience? And one challenge that exists right now about how do you go to some of those experiences is uh, people do not have as much context about themselves, who they are, what lessons they came here to learn, and etc. So in your scenario, you know there is some karma around that where you're afraid that the knowledge will be stolen. And hence, the Matrix has already presented so many scenarios where things were taken from you, like from the knowledge standpoint of view and etc. So as a result, this will get continue presented. And even people who don't have that context, the key thing here is, okay, this experience is presented. Go into that experience from the best of your abilities. And what I mean by that, so let's say you don't have this context about your karma, and you go into it and you don't give the password, and you observe what happened. And the key thing is, because there's so much emotion around this, the key thing here is to reflect on all those experiences. Let's say you don't give the password, and the partnership falls through. So you kind of took a note, okay, that was a learning. I didn't release the password. The partnership didn't work out. Let's see how the life unfolds. Another option, you're like, you give the password, and as you say, all the information gets stolen, and then there's no point of partnership. So now you're like, okay, I've given access to everything. Everything got stolen. Let's reflect on that. The ultimate thing where I'm going with all that, the reason all these reflections are necessary, is you're constantly looking inwardly at your emotional state, at your feelings and emotions. And you're trying to figure out how to remove the emotional instability or this triggering that is happening. Because when there is something triggering, an emotion comes up, and in this scenario, the emotion is things can be knowledge, my work can be stolen, my content can be stolen. When you have a strong feeling around that, Matrix has to continue creating events for things to get stolen from you until you get over it, so that you don't have that energy. And then, because Matrix is just a mirror, if there's no such fear, the Matrix cannot, because it's a mirror, cannot create events where it will be stolen. Do you see what I mean? So you go into it the first few times. That's why the first 30 to 40 years, people go to all these types of events and accumulate all these experiences, which result in unpleasant results, so that they could reflect and work on themselves, so that another similar event like that presents, they still go into it. So they open up and I was like, okay, another one. But now they make a different decision. So in this scenario, you can make a decision. It's like, I'm going to give you access to everything. And if it
Well,
gets stolen,
that's what
it
I
gets stolen.
did. I
Yeah.
mean, I just sent everything, and I was like,
Here
okay,
you go.
well, yeah, and it was just kind of like, well, fuck it, if he's gonna take it, he's gonna, yeah, like, because again, it's not even like with that, it's not even about like stealing the content. I mean, you could lock me out of all my systems.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Well,
you got
yeah.
total control, really. Once you're inside, like, well, you want to be underhanded, you can be underhanded, right? It's like,
Yeah. So let's continue building on that, right? If that is the experience you're supposed to have in this life, you will. There's no way around it. So what's the fucking point of resisting the event? Do you see what I mean? And it only gets harsher. If somebody's, let's say, if somebody is not learning the lesson, let's say, about how to harmoniously interact with the energy of money, there will be a moment where all the money will be taken away from them. Versus if they, if along the way, as the experiences get harsher and harsher, they go into them, let's say they lose money, and they keep relaxing with every cycle, they're like, it is what it is. I'll make more. And when they get to the point where there's zero fear that the money can be taken from them, then the Matrix cannot create that event. because there is no strong emotion inside that the matrix needs to mirror. So, and that's what the whole thing is about surrendering, because people make such a big deal out of all these what we call psychologically traumatic events, because the only thing matrix is trying to do is to help you see some kind of inharmony within, where there is a lot of tension, where there's anger, where there's something that person doesn't understand how to navigate, and figure out how to navigate it in a state of peace. So with this, it's like, look, for you, it's already a major step. You probably in the past would have not given any passwords to anyone unless you've signed 700 contracts and hired like an IT expert that set up extra protections and blah, blah, blah. Here you're like, you were concerned, but then you leaned in and did it anyway. And of course, the lesson here is still unfolding. It could unfold super positively, it could unfold not very positively. But at the end of the day, it will still lead you to the same place where it originally trying to lead you, to completely arrive to the state of peace when it comes to sharing your knowledge. Like if somebody is willing to take it, the experience will, it's same as, like erosion by water or wind. The wind and water will still round the stone sooner or later. And the stone, of course, is the hardest, like one of the hardest form of matter, and it takes time. So you can be either stone, and it's gonna keep hammering you, bigger waves, stronger winds, and etc., but it will get around it. It will become peaceful, and the person will learn the lesson. Or you can right away say, I'm not a stone. I'm just openly gonna go into this and just see what happens, and I'm gonna learn. And it could be positive or it could be negative. And what's interesting, the sooner we get into that state, I'm open, I'm uncomfortable, I'm gonna lean into it, I'm gonna do it. The more we go in that state, usually the lighter the experience is, because it's like it means you've already overcome a bunch of tension and you're much more at peace. Versus when there is a resistance, anger, and etc., that means there is still a huge charge. Hence, something needs to dissipate that charge. And usually, a strong event is what forces the person either to dissipate that charge or to increase the charge further, because what can happen, the wrong conclusion could be, oh, that person stole this from me, and fuck this, I'll never ever share the passwords, I'll never ever give anyone access to my knowledge, blah, blah, blah. Do you see what I mean? And now you got even, the material got even stronger. So now Matrix needs to create even a stronger event to soften you again. With that said, I'll present a flip side. For somebody, the karma could be actually standing up for themselves. So we'll take exactly the same situation as you have, and somebody is like, hey, give me the password and give me all the access. And the person feels uncomfortable saying no. Whereas what they're learning is to actually say no. For them, in that scenario, they'll need to learn to say no and see how for two people, the same scenarios play out completely differently. And this is where pattern recognition and intuition is critical. Because if we're talking about single data point, then this scenario for two different people unfolds differently. However, without the data points from the past, there's not enough data to say, oh, for this person, they need to surrender and just give the password, or for this person, they need to accept they're in such a surrender that they're in such a situation, but bring all their willpower and strengths and decline, so they're not taken advantage of. But that's only recognizable if you look at bigger patterns. And that's why without external help of someone, the person needs to be great at pattern recognition and derive insights from the patterns. The easier way, of course, is like working with someone who has understanding how all this works. So for example, us, and we come in and say, hey, in this situation, and that's why one of my suggestions was just take part of your content and send to your biggest competitor. Because what you're showing to the matrix is that I've got over it. I'm at peace. I'm going to send it to them, let them have it. let them do with it whatever they want, let them resell it, let them write a book based on that, etc. So this way, it's a very aggressive and a rapid way to just close the loop so you don't come back to that. But for most people, it's so internally triggering and shocking that they take slower steps, and every time they release a little bit more and a little bit more. And of course, every personality is different. There's no right or wrong way. For example, for you, it's easier to go step at a time. Uh, for me, because my energy mix is different, I'd rather rip off the band-aid very fast, and it's going to be super fucking painful in the moment, and just get over it, rather than like kind of suffer the pain of 1,000 paper cuts. And that's because I have strengths and willpower as one of my dominating energies, and hence like I've done like a lot of very like a lot of extreme sports, a lot of very high risk taking activities. So me, I'm okay to take a major risk. Like for example, I transferred all my shares in my last company, and that was like probably the second largest share holding in the company, to my business partner for $1. Everybody thought I was nuts. Even him, he was like, listen, can you call the board and say I'm not blackmailing you, and you're not under influence of any weird drugs or alcohol or whatever, that you're doing it in the sane state of mind, right? So I was willing to take a risk to see how my life unfolds, because I felt that was a necessary step for me to fully wrap up the previous meta cycle, or this act of my life that it has completed, but that connection kept pulling me back into my past. And as well as harmoniously, I wanted to bring everything to being just and fair. And since I raised a lot of capital from investors, one thing I was thinking about is, how do I create the highest chance of that capital being returned? Since I'm not the operator anymore, I'm not the CEO running the company anymore. The best way is to incentivize the person who is running it. So his equity, I think, more than doubled. And he became, I think, the largest shareholder in the company. And now he's super incentivized to ensure that company becomes something. So it became win-win. I've closed harmoniously and fairly closed the loop on contracts I've created, personal contracts that I've created with the investors who invested. Yes, they invested in the company, but at the end of the day, investors invest in leaders of the company. That's who, even though they're like looking at all the parameters of the company, they're really evaluating the leaders. Yes, the company is an important context of investment. And so I closed that loop. And then I closed the loop also on my old life, and it stopped pulling back, because every month, every 2 months, there was some kind of call from the company regarding to something, because I'm still a shareholder. I would get investor updates, and the list goes on, right? But this is a very aggressive way for me to learn that lesson, for example, and I was willing to do that. For other people, it will be not very comfortable experience, and they can just do multiple lessons. So if I would summarize it, the key of surrender, you just go to, in the triggering events, you just go into experience and see how it pans out. And then you look back at your life, see if there were similar patterns, and you try to add these patterns and understand what the lesson is, so you understand how to engage the same situation next time. So you still engage the situation, but now your approach will be probably different, because now you've discovered the pattern. Whereas for opportunities, when opportunities are being presented, like let's say people are pinning you and say, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And if you start doing everything, then high chance a lot of those events are not going to lead anywhere. Yeah. So that's where this approach of conservational laziness is great. You're like, okay, I take a note. Somebody said start recording podcast. I sit back. 2 weeks later, another person, hey, why don't we invite you to the podcast? You're like, I take a note. And that's the rule I created for myself, same as Maxime, is like, if it's 3, that means it's time to go. And then the third time, and it's like, why don't we record a podcast? And it was like, time for podcast. And now I start sensing when is the right time to do it. So I start looking at the equipment. It could be the same week, or it could be in a few months. But now I know podcast is happening because and if now fourth and fifth person comes in a week, that means I should accelerate the schedule. So the matrix is always speaking. Whereas if somebody mentions something and it never came back into your field, that's why I never take notes. Like a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of my friends, every session, every meeting, they take notes because they're afraid they're going to miss something. I know I'm not going to miss anything because whatever I'm supposed to do, it will come back more than once. And so hence I don't even record any ideas. I might have genius idea, but in reality, it's genius for the mind that has a very limited purview. And because mind tries ego of the mind tries to be important, it constantly comes up with all these genius ideas. Most of them are not. So that's why the best way is to observe what the world is offering. And if the world is offering it, that means Matrix is pushing you to do that. That means there is growth or benefits for you in that, which is basically the same, growth and benefit. In some scenarios, it would be growth as a benefit. In other scenarios, it will be resources, money, new connections, whatever the list goes on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because I had a moment of the exact same ilk or structure as what you just mentioned there, that actually came from you recommending Michael's book to me. So, as you've read the book, he talks about meeting his guru or finding his guru, the Yogananda, right? And he goes down the yogi path and the meditations and all the stuff that he does his whole life, right? And so as I'm reading that, then he's talking about the type of yoga, Kriya yoga, right? And I'm like, wait a second. I remember my friend had mentioned something about yoga that he was doing before. And so I text Steve and I was like, Steve, what's that shit that you've been doing for years? He's like, Kriya yoga. I'm like,
Here you
because
go.
it, like, as soon as I read it, I was like, I've heard this before, right? But you mentioned it a long time ago, and he's like, it's the greatest spiritual thing I've ever done. Da, da, da. I'm like, okay, cool, whatever, right? And then I'm in my NLP class. This was like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, my NLP class, having a conversation with one of the guys who's one of the students there, and random stuff. And suddenly he's talking about, because we're talking about the NLP stuff. He's like, somehow it got on to meditation. He's like, yeah, I do my my Kriya yoga stuff, and it's and he goes down this whole thing of that, and I'm like, and then I thought, oh, okay, it's the third time, so I signed up for lessons, right?
Here you go.
Because I was just like, okay, why am I hearing about this thing in a short period of time, like 3 different people? But that was a very, at least to me, it felt like a very overt, like, okay. And so, yeah, so should we always be looking for super in your face kind of overt things where we're like, okay, universe, I get it, go do this thing? Is that sort of how you approach things?
Well, super into your face is when is the way while you're developing sensitivity. Once you get to the inner balance, a state of inner balance, you right away know which signal is a signal and which one is noise. You don't even need to wait 3 times. Like right now, I'm at a point where in most of the scenarios, like when something comes into my field, it's like, okay, that's a go. I don't need to wait for a third time. If something bigger, just to double, triple check, I'll hold off until, for example, it pops up like second and a third time, right? So ultimately, these tools are useful when we are still in this journey of rebalancing and harmonizing ourselves. So we use the instruments of the environment or the instrument of the matrix. We basically, it's a unspoken contract with the matrix. Hey, if I need to go somewhere or I need to do something, just like show it to me 3 times. And you can literally create such a contract by saying it out loud. It sounds funny, but that's the word, the thought, the intention, and then the spoken word or the sound is what creates this reality. So hence, by saying that, you create such contract, and then you observe.
So just to twist in a little different direction, would you find that discipline and surrender are competing elements, and in that sort of scenario, which should be allowed to win?
So discipline to surrender is the way to approach life. Many other types of disciplines for most of people are actually counterproductive and hurtful, and I'll unpack that. There is people who are learning the energy of strength and willpower, which you're not. And I have an energy of strength and willpower as dominating energy. I just needed to learn how to use it. So hence, part of that, I needed to go through learning what the discipline is. And what that is setting a goal and basically overcoming hardships on the way to achieve that goal. However, once I've learned and activated that energy, I don't know, like I know how to use it. I don't need to go through the hardships because now I understand how the matrix works, how the universe works, and etc. So for me, the discipline is really about being in a state of a surrender. And that's the ultimate discipline that is applicable to everyone. Because if you create a discipline to be in a state of surrender, and we've described the multiple flavors of surrender, then it is substantially easier for us to align with who we are, align with life, and to minimize hardships, effort, and etc. And what I mean by that is, if right now most of coaching slash guidance for people who are trying to achieve something in their life promotes hard discipline. And that is not applicable to majority of the population because they don't have the energy of strength and willpower, hence they shouldn't be approaching life that way. And if they do, they're basically creating a sub-personality within themselves, and sub-personality does not have energy, which is basically they're copying somebody or somebody's method that is not relevant to them, and they start living their life out of illusion, out of energy that does not exist in them. If the strength and willpower existed in them, then that's their archetype energy, archetypical energy, and hence there is energy source, and then they should approach life that way. But if it's not, which is for many people on this planet, because it's one of the eight energies in the structure of the soul, then what they're doing is basically they start self-violating themselves. They start living in illusion because that's not them. But because they saw, let's say, Nikolai approach life that way, and Nikolai was successful, I should copy Nikolai. And from there, it just goes down the hill. And that's why it is important for people to listen to their intuition. And we've recorded many podcasts to go into things that make you happy. If some kind of method that does not align with today's trends of building business or going through your career or creating or doing whatever you do in life is like you're really being pulled to that method and it makes you happy when you do things that way, that is your unique method. And everybody's method and journey is unique. So hence, that's why the only discipline I recommend is, I shouldn't say the only, one of the main disciplines I recommend is discipline to surrender. Because when you surrender, you can actually sense what is the unique way to approach the situation in front of you. And then rather than becoming rigid and I approach everything through discipline, you actually pick and choose the right tool. The analogy I would give is if you're building a house and you need to cut the wood in two pieces, you have a hammer and a saw. If, for example, you're stuck in a discipline approach, you're just taking a hammer all the time, and now you're not putting the nails in, you need to cut the wood in two pieces, you start hammering the wood until it breaks in two pieces. Whereas if you surrendered observe the situation first. And I was like, okay, wood needs to cut into pieces. What is the approach? Oh, there is another tool here. It's a saw. And it was specifically designed to cut the wood into pieces. You pick it up and cut the wood into pieces. But what's happening today in the world, most people are running with a hammer and doing everything. They're like cracking the eggs for breakfast with a hammer and they're getting surprised why everything gets splashed. They're putting the nails in, they're trying to massage their partner with a hammer because everything, like, there is so much brainwashing that happened. Here's how you achieve success. Here's how you achieve this. Here's how you build this. No, everybody has their unique way of achieving, building, creating, interacting, and surrender creates enough space and buffer to sense what that method is.
Well, so you brought attention to an important point, and I wanted to unpack a little further because you mentioned happiness, and I was really thinking about this because it scrambled my brain a little bit. So if we're trying to do the things that make us happy, or that sort of becomes,
Yeah.
I guess you could say, our North Star in some fashion, right?
Yeah.
What happens when surrender and happiness are at odds with each other? What do we do then? When it's like, well, if I surrender to this, I'll be unhappy. But something is presenting itself that's making me unhappy. How do we reconcile? Are we looking for happiness, or are we looking to surrender at that point? Because that's
Yeah,
sometimes those moments are where it's like, I don't know what to do, right?
I love this question, and the reason I love this question because there is a thought throughout the past 50 minutes that I wanted to share, but then I thought, here, I used the same practice and was like, well, if it comes up multiple times, then I'll share it. And and clearly, and now, and it's a little bit meta, and I started creating this framework to navigate all these questions you're asking. And now you're probably the third person now bringing this up to the surface. And I already have a sketch in Google Slides, but I haven't completed it yet. So this is an indication I should complete it. And to make it easier for people to navigate such situations, I started creating a so-called intuitive decision-making tree. So the first question, when we face a situation, the first question we ask in that intuitive decision-making tree, are we being triggered? Is this pushing us out of comfort zone? Yes, no. If this discomfort is pushing us out of comfort zone, then we have to activate Way of Warrior and go into this experience. Because in reality, it might seem in the moment that it will prevent or destroy the state of happiness, but it's actually leading you to much deeper, more sustainable, bigger state of happiness because it's pushing you to expand. So stepping out of comfort zone, it means the situation will help you expand. If you expand, more energy flows through you, deeper and more sustainable state of happiness and joy. So that's why it is very important to first ask, is this experiencing pushing me out of comfort zone? And if it is, that means there's something to learn. Then you go into it because as a result, you will get the happiness you're looking for, an even deeper and more sustainable state of happiness. If it is a no, it is some kind of an event that has just happened to come into your field and it's just annoyance and whatever. And it's like you've already navigated the situation. You already know how to deal with it. It's not triggering you, but for some reason, somebody like forced it into your field. And by the way, the reason that happens rarely, because if you really learned something, navigate it, and you already expanded, the matrix will not present it to you. But there could be still remnants of either inertia or some kind of programs in the mind where you choose to pay your attention to something. And in reality, you've already expanded and there's no real learning. If it's yes, you just go into it. If it's no, the next question you ask yourself, is this a mandatory thing to do? So if it's not expansive event and it's not triggering, then you go, is this a mandatory thing to do? Meaning, like, could I just not do it and nothing happens in life? And if it's not mandatory, then you just don't do it, don't go into it, and it's no, and you exit the decision-making tree. If it's something that is mandatory, because let's say if you don't renew your residence, then you cannot stay in the country. But it's like an annoying administrative process, right? So you say, then the answer is yes. That means you still have to go into this experience, whereas seemingly it takes away from your happiness. And if it does take away from your happiness, that means you're still not at the state of peace. That means you can still expand and learn something to face that process that seems administrative, bureaucratic, and etc. So that you go into it with full peace. But then, so if it's mandatory, we say yes, we go into it and we do it. And very rarely those events that we need to do don't end up having other sub-experiences that will help us grow and expand. So in a moment, it might seem like, okay, it's mandatory, so it's yes, I have to do it. And then there is, as it unfolds, the other experiences happen that are challenging your comfort zone. So it kind of comes back to the top. So when you said yes, then the next question for people becomes, well, if it's yes, then I should do it as fast as possible. And that's where it becomes forceful or through discipline, because I know it's yes. We were taught to be a good student, a good performer, a good worker, a good entrepreneur, good father, the list goes on. I should check those things as fast as possible, and I'll get a little medal that I've done everything right away and now I can relax. That is not true. Next question you ask, do I sense like it is the right time to do it? And if you're really excited to do it, like after you go through all this and you have this like pull and at least tiny bit of excitement to do it, then there's a higher chance that it is the right time to do it. In a lot of scenarios, it's not the right time to do it. So the answer is no. So hence you just park this project, this activity, until you cannot sit in your chair or you cannot stop yourself from doing it. And I'll give you an example. For me, the best test, let's say, if I don't know, I'm going to go do something fun that I know I'm going to have fun. And I go do something fun. Let's say watch a good comedy, right? And I start watching it and I'm 10, 15 minutes into it. And my body just wants and go do it, not from a place of I have to self-punishment, but it just wants to. It would be a better choice than watching this fun movie. Then I would pause the movie and go do it. That means it's the time. If I'm sitting watching a movie and I'm thinking, oh, like, I don't even want to fucking think about doing that thing, that means it's not the time. That means watching the movie is a better choice, or doing whatever else you want to do. And that's how you align on all the aspects of what to do, what not to do, and when to do.
And what about when it's one of those like mandatory administrative tasks that if you were sitting there, there's no part of you that's like, well, I want to do this, right? Like of course the movie's going to be more fun. What is the shift then? Is it just when you get pushed up against the fear where it's like, hey, okay, they're taking away my residency tomorrow if I don't do it, like, so then it's not a fun thing, it's a fear thing? Is that what we're then looking for, or what?
Well, so there are a few aspects here, and that's why this whole world is so nuanced, right? And that's why we have to learn to use our intuition. In some scenarios, if you're in a situation you've been procrastinating and the energy was not flowing at all to doing this renewal, maybe you should not have the residency. Do you see what I mean? That could be one of the outcomes. And you don't know yet why, because the events are still unfolding. So in some scenarios, you could just like let it go. And the interesting thing, when I've experienced those scenarios, if I'm meant to, let's say, to keep the residency, so many things will pop up in my life to remind me to do it. And at some point in time, I will feel this is the moment, and I'll just go and do it easily. Versus if that's not the path, nothing will pop out, and I'll have no excitement, and I'll never have energy. So let it just sail. And like, I'll give you an example. We have one company registered, and we've decided to close it because it's not serving a purpose anymore. And I messaged the company that registered it. It's in one of the jurisdictions where you have to use this agency to deal with the government. Like, we're not located in that jurisdiction, nor we know how that jurisdiction works. So I messaged them beginning of this year. That's when we decided to shut it down. No response. So to me, that's a sign. I was like, you know what? Maybe it's not time to close the company. And I chill, and then I get another ping because events start unfolding. Okay, now it's definitely the time to close the company. I ping them again, and then this time they respond, and I understand why they didn't respond the first time. They basically say, you can pay us over $5,000 to close it, and it's a headache of a process, or you can just do nothing, and the government will strike it down and it will self-close. And I was like, I choose option number 2. That means I continue. I don't need to do anything, right? And this is to live life in such an alignment with least amount of actions, you get the results you desire. That's why the surrender approach is important, because when you surrender, it creates this buffer to really, and of course, once again, we mentioned there are so many flavors of surrender, but at least one of the flavors of surrender is stepping back and not rushing into things, not acting right away, and like just kind of tasting the flavor of the energy of the event, of the person a little bit, to kind of start engaging thoughtfully and consciously with whatever is to unfold, right? So, or another option, just to answer the second part of the question, if that resonancy has to stay, I guarantee you there will be time where you will have energy and excitement to do those papers or whatever you need to do, because that's how the world is wired. If that residency is in the highest alignment for your life, there will be an energy allocated to you to ensure there's continuity of that residency. However, what happens, because people live in a constant self-violating state where they constantly self-punish themselves by forcing themselves to do things that are not necessarily or not the right time, or through this construct of discipline. When that moment comes to do those papers, because you've already been like self-punishing yourself for so long, you're like, fuck it, I don't want to deal with another thing, and you miss the signal. So the more we live in this state of surrender, or which is even better, the state of alignment with a buffer of a surrender, that easier everything becomes. Because when that energy comes, it's like, oh, I'm watching comedy that I'm enjoying, but it's just the energy is flowing. I'm going to go do this boring paperwork. And you just go do it. And the funniest thing, it actually is not boring, because now there is a match of energy. There is an energy accumulated that wanted to express itself specifically in this type of activity. So as a result, it actually, even the most boring bureaucratic activity is done from a state of flow. And what we're ultimately leading to here was when we learn to apply the state of surrender or the state of alignment, then we start living in a flow. And in the state of flow, everything is easy. It's like you just do it, you forget about like physical needs, like going to washroom, needing to eat and etc., because it's just flowing. And I've experienced that. It's like, recently, I'll give an example. I needed to clean up an old, so we had clients on one system, and then we transitioned everything to the new system, and old clients still stayed in the old system. But one of our old clients, we re-engaged and we're working again, and now I need to migrate all the stuff to the new system. It's like the most, first of all, like I didn't set up the old system. It was set up by the old team members. Second of all, it's the most, I believed there was the most boring, teeth-pulling activity. Go figure out the old system. It's all administrative. It's like which files are where, how they're all tied together, and blah, blah, blah. So seemingly, it's the activity that's like the most shitty activity you could come up with. at least for me, because
Yeah.
I like creating new things. I want to do fun things. And then I was like, well, sooner or later I'll need to do it, right? But now I know how the world works, how the matrix works. I was like, okay, I set an intention. There's nobody else can do it on the team. So hence I went through this decision making tree, the intuitive decision making tree, and I landed on yes, I have to do it. It's mandatory because we're engaging with this client, and I'm the only one who can do it. But it's not the time yet because right now I feel resentment and I feel like if I do it, I'll throw up, you know? So I just chill for like, and I just uh, check in kind of is the time. No. But now I'm getting to also the stage where I don't check in. I know the time will come and it will be very clear. And then a few weeks later, the time comes and I was like, and I don't remember, like I was doing something fun. Now I'm like, the whole time I'm doing something fun. And then I was like, oh, it would be so fun to go figure out that old system. I don't even know how it was structured, but it would be interesting to see how like previous team members designed it, and maybe I can actually learn something from it, and maybe we can get some benefits out of it in the new system. So I go and start going through all these folders and all these recordings and all these documents, and I was like, oh, okay, interesting. And then I was like, so that was the first step, and then I realized, okay, that was enough. It was fun, but continuing will not be fun. So I pause. Then I go on with my life for another week or two. And by the way, I was very upfront with the client. I was like, hey, listen, we've shifted systems and we haven't transferred all stuff from the old system to the new one. And it will take a little bit of time. And this way, through clear communication, I didn't create any hard forcing function. And then I also told him, if you need anything from the old system, something specific, I'll just give you direct links. I'll give you direct access to that content. That's it. So it's a win-win, right? So
Yeah.
now I continue going on. We're already working with this client, but I continue observing how the life unfolds, and then the next wave comes of energy, and then I go. And I was like, and because I've already taken in the first stage, I've taken in all the specs, let's say. And now the solution is brewing, right? And I allow the solution to emerge rather than forcing the solution. So once again, I'm back in this state of surrender that, well, I know I need to do it, but I'm not going to force myself because I don't force myself to do anything anymore because that's living in misalignment. So then another wave comes and I have clear solution. I go in and I've tried few things of what I thought the clear solution was, realized there is an even better solution, and realized there's a bunch of work that I don't even need to do that I originally first need to do. And then I did everything in probably like under an hour. And that's because everything was in alignment. And by the way, what I've observed, even the biggest projects that I thought would take days, when things are done in alignment, take hours or minutes.
Hmm.
And when we are not in alignment, when we haven't stepped back, we haven't asked ourselves those questions, we haven't sensed, then we start forcing ourselves, and every action is penalizing because there's no energy. So you're using the wrong type of, you're basically using the hammer to cut the wood into pieces.
Hmm.
Substantially more energy, substantially more time. To cut 2x4 in two pieces with a hammer probably will take few days. With a saw, few minutes.
Yeah. I'm gonna need that intuitive decision tree, by the way, just FYI.
Yeah. And I'll publish it here as well. So this is a third little
Ta-da.
little bell from Matrix that I should complete it.
Yeah. So one thing, just to kind of wrap this up here, um, it's a couple different things, right? So one, and I think you sort of touched on a little bit, but like, what about um obligations or duties, right? In terms
Mhm.
of surrender, but then also, where does a sense of morality come into it? And I preface this, as I've been going into some of the yogic stuff, like they have, there's bits and pieces where there is a sort of code of conduct, or sort of right way that you should be living, and you see this obviously in different, I'm sure they have it in Buddhism, Christian, like everybody has, like, okay, this is the right way to sort of behave or act in the world, or etc. But like, what if we surrender to a life that is, again, harmful but presented to us? Is that that how do people, like, how are they able to figure out that? Or would Matrix, let me say it this way,
Yeah.
would Matrix present stuff to us specifically to test us? And you could see all sorts of flavors of, I mean, just to give like a crude example, it could be the guy at the office and the secretary's, maybe the secretary's hitting on him, and it's like, well, you could go into that experience, but probably not what I should be doing, right? But then, well, maybe Matrix is like, well, you need to get out of your marriage, so here's the secretary. I mean, examples, it's a
Yeah.
crude example, but like, where we get
It's a great
presented with
example.
things and there's a moral issue sort of at play between, do we surrender and go into the experience, or how do we know when is the time to do the quote unquote right thing? Can you talk about that a little
Yeah.
bit?
So ultimately, all these experiences that are presented are teaching us how to interact with specific types of energies in alignment with universal laws. And that's that so-called moral compass or moral code that you're talking about. And
Mm-hmm.
we have the first book translated and published to English, which covers 5 universal laws. And one of the earlier episodes, I've talked about each universal law. If anybody wants to talk about them, or start to learn about them. Um, so um, Basically, um, what I mean by that, so the scenario you presented, right? The person is like, oh, the secretary's hot. I just want to go in, right? And the question becomes here is, which way do you want to learn this lesson? There are 2 ways. One, through reflection and recognition and adjustments of the worldview and realignment of some of their worldviews. The other one is going into the experience and seeing what happens and then learning a lesson. So the more of the more we develop of this state of surrender and reflective and conscious state, the more we develop this buffer, the more often we will choose not to participate in the theatrics and rather actually derive the learnings just by observing what type of experience Matrix is pulling us into. And basically, what's happening then is like, oh, Matrix is trying to pull me into this. Why? Oh, because I have this energy where I'm always scheming and I think I won't be caught for scheming. So it's trying to mirror this to me by presenting the situation where I can cheat on my wife and hopefully not get caught. Versus is like, well, clearly this is not harmonious and not aligned with universal laws. So I was like, okay, I got the lesson. I don't need to go through experience. I choose my worldview, and from here and on, I choose not to scheme. Because if I'm scheming, the matrix has to mirror that. That means somebody else will be scheming with us. So, for example, what could happen? You go into that experience, and secretary herself sends a little, photo of 2 of you to your wife, because it just has to mirror the experience. But if you don't have that energy anymore, then those events will stop presenting. So there is no allure to go into something like that. And to give you, to add here, a dear friend of mine loves this saying: 99%, no, 100% is a breeze, 99% is a bitch. So anytime somewhere you live your life and 99%, and there's this 1% that the door is slightly open, you haven't clearly made a decision for you how to harmoniously interact with specific type of situations, which is the specific type of energy, then you will always have this thought at the back of mind. Maybe this time I won't get caught. Maybe there is a creative way of doing it, and that's that 1%. If you basically decided that is not a harmonious thing to do, everybody talks about it, it's not a nice thing to do to cheat on your wife, right? I make 100% decision, the life becomes easy, the matrix stops presenting it will present few of those events to test you if it's really 100%, and you click in and it's 100%, all these options disappear from your life. Like the matrix don't need to test you anymore because you're at 100% now. So that's one. Another one, and maybe that could be one of our future podcasts because I think it's becoming more and more relevant. There are people who do go into these, let's call them negative experiences, and they basically, that means they chose the dark path to enlightenment. So, and we talked about systematic darks, non-systematic darks. So those are basically, this is a just dark path to awakening, and some people should actually go and, sleep with as many secretaries as possible, because it's their job, let's say, to take the energy from the secretary so that she doesn't sleep with a good guy per se. So he's doing the surface by taking this extra energy so that she doesn't spend her, for example, energy seducing the guy who is a good family man, and he's like maybe at 99%, that's why it would happen, but he's like almost at 100%. So for some people, they do lean into these, let's call them darker experiences. It's in their job, and they're actually, it's a very when they understand who they are and how to engage in that role, it's very constructive because they are actually the protectors of the system. They're the guardians of the system. They remove overly expressed potential of people who could do something damaging to other people, to the system, or etc. So let's say somebody accumulated a lot of money and they haven't learned how to interact with that, and they decide to spend money on drugs. So the dark person comes in and involves them in some kind of sketchy investment scheme, let's say in crypto, and takes away 95% of their capital. And now that person is devastated, and they're like, don't even have money to buy drugs, right? And now they have to really rethink their life. So that could be a path that is also aligned with universal laws, because so for example, a constructive examples of that are like police enforces laws because not everyone on this planet learned how to live in accordance with universal laws, and they still have energy to go do all types of weird shit. So we accept that police is constructive. In reality, police is a subset of a systematic dark structure. Same as like financial auditors. They go in and audit the books to make sure nobody's doing anything sketchy. That is so-called some people who choose dark path will end up being financial auditors. But because societally it's a constructive role, we don't see them as dark, for example, right? And I've given you examples of constructive and destructive ways of taking that dark path. So hence, and that's the beauty of this universe. There's a lot of nuance, and there's not a rigid, this is the way and that's it. If anybody comes and tells you this is the way you should live and this is your life because I lived it that way and 10 other people lived it that way, run from that person. Like when we work with someone, when somebody, like, you could ask me exactly the same question and I'll give you one answer, as another person I'll give them a completely different answer, because they're wired and their life path or their incarnation program is different. And for the same question with the same context, it will be a different response. So that is, if we would wrap it up and bring it to where we started, that is why the surrender experiment by Michael Singer and the surrender approach is so critical. When you learn how to surrender, you'll start sensing and learning how to align with your unique path. And what is big no-no in Mitch's life path is a definite go, could be a definite go in Nikolai's life. And hence, we shouldn't live lives through templates or stereotypes, and rather develop instruments that allow us to discern. So the surrender allows us to develop the ability to discern. And that's the ability to discern is ultimately becomes what synchronizes our triad, the mind, the soul, and the spirit. And that what takes us to where we're trying to go, the sustainable deep state of joy, of happiness. Because when we develop this discerning, what we call discerning mind, then we know as situations come up, oh, this situation I easily lean into. This situation is on hold. I'll wait till the energy is formed so I can easily do it. This situation is not even about me. So I'll give you an example. Like I'm driving, accident happens in front of me. So the first thing I ask inwardly quickly, is this a symbol for me? Because there's so many cars on the road, in the beginning, a lot of those accidents were signs for me, because it's like, hey, slow down, you're rushing in your life. That was the sign. Whereas then it stopped being that. It's the sign for somebody else across the road who is rushing or not paying attention or whatever. And it is also a lesson for people in the accident. So, and that's the example of discernment. It's like the situation unfolded. Oh, it's not for me. And I keep going with my life. And surrender capability is very powerful.
Well, I'm going to keep trying to surrender here as we keep going through this crazy life experiment. And yeah, that was fantastic. And again, it's like the third time, we'll all be waiting patiently for your intuitive, how did you call it? It was the intuitive
Intuitive decision-making tree.
Yes, intuitive decision-making tree, because I need that. Oh, well, that's it. We made it through. Internet successful, co-working successful. So this setup is a go. So I look forward to
we're back
next week.
We're back to our weekly ritual. And what I wanted to also add, I feel like we can revisit this surrender experiment or surrender approach to life in, let's call it 4 to 8 weeks, as you've applied more and more, because so much more nuance will come up. And it's so much like I shared a lot of examples, and I've kind of tried to also share the broad strokes. But as you face more situations, then we can talk through more interesting specific examples, and that will give yourself as well as other people who are watching this more meat on the bone to be able to help their mind to surrender, because what is not willing to surrender is mind's ego.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's hard.
I 100% agree with that.
No.
Well, a little meat on the bone never hurt anybody, right? Glorified steak, if you will. So,
unless they're vegetarian or vegan, that might, But even that, then surrender. What is
surrender,
the message,
baby. Just take a bite. Surrender. All right,
okay,
brother.
Mitch.
Well, looking forward to next week.
Likewise.